Here's a guy who thinks that a god gives you purpose in life.
Deep down inside, every single human person is a God-shaped vacuum waiting to be filled.
Filled with what? Filled with God? Isn't every place supposedly filled with God? I thought he was supposed to be omnipresent. If an omnipresent God exists, how could there be any God vacuum anywhere? If your God is inherently omnipresent, then the only way anyone has any God vacuum inside of them is if such a God does not exist.
There are many people, and perhaps maybe you are one of them, who is searching for answers to the purpose and meaning of life.
I'm not one of them because I don't think there is any inherent purpose or meaning to life. Even if there were a God, there is no objective inherent reason why the purposes he has in mind have to be the purposes we adopt. Whether there is a God or not, what we choose to do with ourselves is ultimately up to us.
These existential questions matter a great deal, and I believe by answering the question if there is a God, it will help you find true meaning and purpose in your life.
No, it won't. Because again, even if there is a God, and even if this God has some purpose in mind for my life, such a meaning is no more objectively true than something I might find in a horoscope or a fortune cookie.
So in this video, I'm going to lay out the case why I believe there is a God. So whether you're an atheist, a Christian, or you're not sure what you believe, I want you to know this. I'm making this video not to put anybody down, but to have an open discussion, to have an open dialogue to help you and I understand the purpose and meaning of life. So to help show the evidence for God's existence, I'm going to use a simple acronym for God. It stands for goodness, origin, and design. So let's start with goodness. This is known as the moral law argument, and it could be summarized as follows. Number one, moral law implies a moral lawgiver.
And the fact that there are no moral laws independent of human laws implies that there are no lawgivers other than human beings.
2, there is an objective moral law. 3, therefore, there is an objective moral lawgiver.
There is no such thing as objective moral law, even if there is a God. To say that something is objective is to say that its existence is not dependent upon the existence of any subject. A subject is any being which is conscious, because to be conscious is to have subjective experiences. Even if there is a law which comes from a God and which is dependent upon that God, such a law is dependent upon the existence of a conscious being, a subject, and is therefore still subjective.
Now, there's no denying that there are objective moral laws that govern each one of us.
It's obviously not true that there's no denying it, because I just denied it. And what would it even mean to say that such laws govern us? If you don't believe in any afterlife, especially one in which people are punished, then it isn't obvious at all that there are any rules that govern us in the way that states govern us. If we see no problem with committing an act that you would consider immoral according to your religion, and we live in a jurisdiction in which such an act is legal, then to a person who does not believe in a punitive afterlife, it is very easy to deny that such a law in any perceptible way governs us.
That there are moral values, that we believe there are things that are good, and there are moral duties. What that means is there are moral obligations that you and I have to do the good and not do that which is bad.
And in what way that is not contingent upon human beings are these obligations enforced? If they are not enforced by human beings, then they have no practical meaning or consequences on this planet. In other words, they don't discernibly exist.
These are inherent in all of us.
If the rules of your religion are inherent to me, then how is it that the rules against things like graven images seem totally alien to any moral sense that I have, or have ever had? Moreover, if they are inherent to all of us, why did Yahweh have to write them into stone and show them to anybody? Why did they need to even be listed in Scripture?
So whether you are an atheist or you're a theist, all of us are bound to do unto others as we would want them to do to us.
Bound in what sense? What specifically does the binding? Do you not believe in free will? How can people be simultaneously both free and bound?
But the fact is, we all hold to an objective moral standard that transcends all of us.
What do you mean we all hold to it? In what sense do murderers hold to a rule against murder? In what sense do I hold to the standard that people shouldn't make graven images? That's a rule I neither follow nor believe in, so I don't see how I hold to it in any sense at all.
That there are moral laws that are objective to all humans on the basis that there is an objective moral lawgiver who is the ultimate moral standard by which we are able to differentiate right from wrong. And that ultimate standard, that objective moral lawgiver, I believe is God. Now we turn to origin.
This is another guy who thinks there's such a thing as a law of causality. There is no such law. David Hume pointed out more than 200 years ago that we can't be sure that causation is even a real thing, let alone something we can call a law.
Now, the argument for the origin of the universe goes something like this. One, everything that had a beginning has a cause.
What would it mean for time itself to have a cause? How can you carry out the act of causation without time first existing in which you could carry out such an act?
The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause.
Even if it were the case that everything which had a beginning had a cause, it seems at least as much to be the case that everything that was ever made was made out of something rather than out of nothing. So how did a god create a universe out of nothing?
So let's unpack what this means when we talk about the origin of the universe. Now, according to the law of causality, every effect must have a cause.
This is tautological sophistry. Of course, every effect has a cause because an effect is defined as being the consequence of a cause. Yes, every effect has a cause, but not everything that exists is necessarily an effect.
Now, you and I know it's nonsense to believe that something came from nothing.
Which is why I think it's nonsensical to say that a god made the universe out of nothing.
Which leads us to our second premise that affirms that the universe had a beginning. We know this on three powerful scientific facts. Number one, based on the second law of thermodynamics that says the universe is running out of usable energy. Secondly, when you look at Einstein's general theory of relativity, he showed back in 1917 that the universe in fact had a beginning, that time, space, and matter were all needed in order for the universe to exist. And finally, number three, another scientific proof is the fact that the universe is indeed expanding, that it's spreading from a beginning point. All of this points to the fact that the universe had a beginning. And if it had a beginning, then the universe must have had a cause greater than itself in order for it to exist in the first place.
First of all, no it didn't. Secondly, what do you mean by greater than itself? It obviously wasn't spatially or temporally greater if time and space didn't exist prior to the universe. In what sense do you mean greater if you don't mean bigger or older?
That greater cause, I believe, is God. And finally, we come to D, which stands for design. Every complex design has a designer.
This is more tautological sophistry. Of course, not just every complex design has a designer, but every design has a designer by definition. Not everything, not even everything complex, however, is a design.
The universe has a highly complex design, therefore the universe had a designer.
The universe is complex, but how do you know that its complexity is a design?
So I'm going to share with you three key designs that you and I see. One, it comes from the universe. Secondly, when it comes to the earth. And finally, I want to show you some key things when it comes to divine design in human life. So let's take a look at one very finely tuned constant of the universe, gravity. If the force of gravity were slightly altered from the gravitational force, the world could not sustain life.
So you're telling me that your God is not capable of creating life that could exist on a planet if the force of gravity on that planet were even slightly different? Such a God doesn't sound very powerful to me. He certainly doesn't sound all-powerful. In fact, he doesn't even seem powerful enough to be worthy of being called a God.
A second reason is the conditions of the earth. The earth's atmosphere has perfect conditions of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and hydrogen to be a habitable planet for life to survive and thrive on Earth. Oxygen comprises 21% of the atmosphere. If it were any higher, it would create massive fires, and if it was any lower, life would suffocate.
Well, this is just flat out false. The oxygen levels on the Earth have varied significantly over the course of its existence. During the Permian, it was as high as 30%, and there was plenty of life back then. The Earth didn't burst into flames. And not only did life exist in these different oxygen levels, some forms of life thrived even better in them. The reason we don't see 3-foot dragonflies anymore is because there just isn't currently enough oxygen to sustain insects that big.
And finally, as impressive as it is to see such complex design within the universe and our planet, the divine design of the human body is so much more incredible. If you took all the information in the human brain, it would exceed all the books in the Library of Congress.
The what?
The Library of Congress.
So what? Information is simply non-randomness. The fact that nature has non-random processes and structures, even complex ones, in no way implies the existence of an intelligent creator.
Now, common sense tells us, as I mentioned before, if it takes a sculpture to sculpt a statue.
Wait, what?
If it takes a sculpture to sculpt a statue.
Okay, but not everything is a statue. Not everything which exists requires an intelligence to create it. Not even complex and orderly things need to be created by an intelligence.
We must assume it takes a creator to create the most amazing detail of human life.
Why?
So, in wrapping up this video, is there a God? Well, based on the fact that goodness exists,
Objective goodness does not exist, even if there is a God.
and that the origin of the universe came from a cause greater than itself,
It didn't come from a cause, and what does greater than itself even mean?
and that design intelligence is all around us,
No, it isn't.
I believe all this points to the fact that yes, there is a God.
This is a conclusion that doesn't follow from premises that aren't even true.